Hello, this is Casey from Casey Grandpa Tech, where we talk about tech, fun stuff, and much, much more. Hey, listen, today I want to talk to you about the trip to Mars and space travel. There's been a lot of talk, of course, as we watch SpaceX and NASA and everybody getting ready to get to the first mission to the moon and then eventually to Mars. But there's a lot of things to be talked about what problems they're going to face. Now we have the obvious problems that they're going to have. The water source, you know, how do you recycle the water? Finding another water source on Mars, food supply, can you grow enough food? Otherwise you've got to be resupplying the Mars with that food, just like at the International Space Station. Can we actually terraform the planet? And of course, most importantly, is radiation. The radiation on Mars is twice that of even on the International Space Station. And of course, the spacesuits, which is right now being looked at by the Mars rover that's going to arrive from NASA, which is going to test various materials for the spacesuit. Because if a spacesuit fails, you're in deep trouble. So those are all the possible problems that you can incur, but there is one that I want to talk about today, and that is the mental fitness of the crew. As you can imagine, being in such a small space has its trials. And as many of us have realized with COVID-19 and being stuck in the house, okay, the amount of domestic violence and internal fighting in the house has increased dramatically. Now, you can imagine that being on a spacecraft like the International Space Station, you ain't got no personal space. You're cramped in a little bitty tiny area in the spacecraft. You're constantly with people all around you. And you have to deal with odors and other things that may not be comfortable. So, well, let's get into that some more. Some of the things that make this a major situation. Now, of course, on the International Space Station, even though they're crammed into a tiny space and all that goes on in there, they do have their moments of fun. Here's one of the astronauts, Samantha, who dressed up as Captain Janeway, and they had a bit of a fun time up there. They also did one of the other astronauts also had some fun, and let me show you. And as you can imagine, if you're away from home and you're missing your family, they set up a Christmas tree. But then, of course, there is the other things that can happen on the spacecraft. For instance, did you know that they had a leak on the toilet on the International Space Station? And 2 gallons of water leaked out into the spacecraft, and they had to repair that themselves and get the system back on operational. Of course, they're going to have an upgraded toilet, but imagine all that. Imagine you had a leak in your home, and it leaked all over the place. Well, this stuff is floating all over the place. Now, that has its mental awareness on the crew. Can you get this thing working? Look at the smell, and being stuck in an area that small. Psychology Today says that for a Mars colony to work, you need about 17 square feet per person to be healthy environment. That's about the size of a trailer truck. And there's other things they have to worry about, such as radiation, weightlessness, and those all have their effect on the psychology and the feelings that you have. I'm going to get into that now. Some of the greatest problems that, of course, is going to occur for a colony on Mars is, where do you put everybody? Now, the Chinese and the Americans, of course, have built facilities on Earth to try to get an idea of what's going to look like. I mean, here we have a Chinese habitat that's in the desert that they're going in and out of and practicing as if they were on Mars, trying to simulate the environment and the living conditions. But when you get there, the biggest problem is you just can't go to IKEA or call Amazon to get the things you need. So you're going to have to make some things. And one solution that they found, okay, is by using 3D printing. So a corporation designed Marsha, which they got a $500 million contract, and they've actually made a habitat here on Earth, and they plan to use the materials that most of the material that are on Mars already. Let me get into that now. Now, what that will entail, of course, they know that there's what materials are basically on the Mars surface. And of course, they have what they'll have to do is to grow plants to make the biomatter, but then they'll be able to 3D print these buildings, so to speak, which will have several stories in height. And give you an example of, it'll have multiple floors, windows, because one of the problems that they're trying to figure out is either you build the base underground against the radiation, or you find a way of building a building that's radiation proof. Because the one thing for a person's mental health is you need to have some kind of natural light coming in. Otherwise, the person, depression and everything else is going to set in. Let me show you a few more pictures about that. Now, here's a picture of in the lab where they started using the 3D printing, and they began to build a miniature version of the habitat that they were going to have. That's going to lead to this multiple floor facility, which will have a lab, living quarters, a shower, things of that nature. These things we're talking about, quite a bit of footage. If you're thinking about 60 feet more. And that's going to be great. But let's talk about a few other things. All of this is trying to give some type of a home sweet home type of deal with this. And it looks really, really good. But remember, that is even as comfortable as you make it. Think about what you've been going through with COVID-19, being stuck in the house. It's not like you can get up and listen. I'd like to go down to the Wawa and pick up a sandwich. Everything that you have is in that small quarters. And if you have a problem, you got a problem. And of course, setting them up and building them is going to be a major situation. I mean, you have to build the windows, you have to have cranes that are going to put the pieces together, and then you have to make all the pieces. That's going to be a feed into itself. So let me show you something else. Even as they build these facilities, the early ones will be very uncomfortable launch places. The habitats and everything else, they're going to be crammed into small places. And the other thing that they have to worry about, of course, is their health. I don't know if you've ever kept on any information about the International Space Station, and they've had their more than fair share of problems up there. They talked about the space toilet breaking and leaking 2 gallons of dirty water all over the place. And then just recently on the spacecraft, they had a leak that they had a hard time failing, and the air pressure inside of the spacecraft was starting to drop dramatically to the point where it was getting critical. Fortunately, the Russian astronauts were able to come up with a fix by using tea bags. Yes, I know, tea bags, and some tape, and able to, after they found the leak. And that's another problem that you're going to have. And that, of course, is that the International Space Station was supposed to be up there for no more than 15 years in this particular module. And it's been there now 20. So things are starting to break like they never broke before. Things weren't designed to handle it. On top of that, when you're on Mars, direct communication with your people at home is not exactly a walk in the park. If you've watched the TV series Away, just as they're traveling further and further away from the planet, and to Mars, they have such mental issues, homesickness. If they have a family issue at home, they can't just go home and go fix it. Okay. Um, you're stuck with the same people on the planet for a long time. I mean, the average Mars mission would be 7 months going to, 2 years there, and if you're going to return home, another 7 months in a tin can. That's not fun. Not only that, but psychology today has discovered that there's some major effects of being in space. One of the things that they've discovered is that the gray matter in the brain begins to dissolve and disappear. That leads to psychosis, mental unstableness, blindness, inability to motor function begins to fail. So there's a lot of things that are going to be faced by the astronauts. And their mental acuity is, of course, critical. If you recently watched the astronauts returning from the ISIS spacecraft, when they were taken out of the capsule, they had to be carried by gurney because they've lost so much muscle mass and strength that they couldn't walk on their own. So these are some of the things that astronauts are going to be facing from day to day. So let me finish up, and we'll talk about. By the way, if I haven't done so already, I hope you've been enjoying some of these talks I've been giving you about space. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and share this. A lot of work goes into these, and I enjoy bringing them to you. So please do that. So let me finish up with some thoughts, and I'm going to leave these links in the in the description. Again, some of the information came from Psychology Today about some of the effects, but the main thing is that we're going to see them as we go to the moon, back to the moon, and we go back to Mars, is the psychological integrity of people who are working on these. Right now, there's such an interesting problems that are occurring with the people that are already on ISIS up there. Their mental health, their brains shrinking, the space blindness that's occurring. What else kind of things? And of course, as further and further they get away from their home, their loved ones, it's going to have its effect. Not only radiation has an effect on the brain, and like I said, causing the gray matter to shrink. It's recommended now that the average person have at least 25 cubic feet of personal living space. But that's not even that. You think about what, again, finishing up about, like, we've been all stuck with COVID-19 inside a small area.
Motion detected at the front door.
Being all stuck in this small area. And you're going to be stuck on a planet. You can't go outside. You can't take a run. You can't run to the Wawa. And definitely the mental health of people who planning to colonize Mars and beyond are going to have. So this is Casey from Casey Grandpa Tech. I hope this has been helpful and educational for you. And until next time, this is Casey out.